Hello everybody. Earlier this week I proposed a Volvo XC70 as the only car one might ever need. And then I followed that up with a slightly less sensible suggestion of an Alfa Romeo 156 GTA sport wagon. Well, if the 156 is still far too sane for your liking, may I present this, the Maserati Coupe, or 4200 as many people like to call it. Many people except those that work for Maserati. Now the Coupe is rather similar to a car that I've had previously on the channel twice, the 3200. And at a quick glance you'd be forgiven for mistaking the two because they are indeed very similar. If you're unsure of what the differences are, well, there's a few very big ones. The big difference most people talk about is the Boomerang Lights, which were a nice feature on the back of the 3200, replaced here with much more conventional units. Of more interest to us petrol heads though is the replacement of the old Maserati 3.2 litre bi-turbo with a Ferrari Maserati lump of 4.2 litres, often cited as being the one out the 430. Now the truth is that this car actually predates the 430 by quite some time, and it seems people can't quite agree as to whether this is a Ferrari or a Maserati engine. But I don't think it actually matters that much, because it is just over 4.2 litres of beautiful Italian V8 goodness. The Coupe, much like the 3200, looks very good from some angles and not so good from others. But what is also the same for both is the fact that in here feels truly special. This is a wonderful thing to be in. Now, if you've seen my review of the 3200, you'll know that it was a car I could never quite fall for. You see, it had a few issues. The engine was just a bit odd, really. It was certainly effective and it was a quick car, but I couldn't gel with it. If for no other reason than the suspension just couldn't really make its mind up. It was either a bit too soft and wallowy, yet still crashy, or just needlessly firm without being that exciting in the corners, and the steering had a real sloppiness. There's a hesitation to it. So you'd turn the wheel, then the car would dart in with a real eagerness, but about half a second too late. So it all felt rather unresolved, and for a car with so many clear links to Ferrari, it just, well, wasn't good enough. The hope is that this might be a little bit more resolved, and if it's the sort of car you're thinking of buying, I can certainly bring you some good news already. You see, this has been in its current owner's possession for about 7 years, and in that time, it hasn't broken. It's been very good, very reliable. Now, these are not the cheapest things to service, and he would recommend setting aside some £1,500 or so a year for making sure the car is in tip-top condition. The engine is a firecracker. Not only does it look good, but it delivers the goods too. Really quite nice to use. You can rev match, and it makes the noise. It can go all right too. The chassis, that's an odd one. The steering is a little bit better than in the 32. There's still something of a hesitation though, and when you do start to press on, you get over some more complex corners with some compressions, some dips and things. It goes a little bit odd and a bit flighty and a touch worrying. It is still a very firm riding car. In normal mode, which I'm currently using on a fairly smooth surface, obviously, it's not too bad, but sport is very harsh, especially at town speeds. Now the gearbox in here is a transaxle 6-speed unit, and it's very unusual to see a 4200 equipped with a manual box. Most of them had the Cambio Corsa system that Maserati were championing at the time. That is essentially an identical system to what Ferrari were using and what they dubbed F1. crazy hyper alert as the 3200, and that really is a very good thing. Certainly also not lacking for pace, but under braking where it takes on a very unusual character. Sounds superb though. Yeah, you lean on them and they fight back way earlier than you expect them to. Possibly the tyres on this particular car might not be their best. Road conditions are also somewhat changeable too. And that's a shame, because that is actually what gets in your way of enjoying this car. It also tries to follow the camber quite significantly when you're leaning on the brakes. And it's a shame. That's a big part of a puzzle to be missing in the car, the brakes. There is, however, beyond that, a lot to like about this car. It feels, although it appears to be similar to the 3200 in here, a lot better built. This is a really quite a nice place to be. The engine is in another league. I know people like the old bi-turbo lump. This is better. This is just a lot better. And the fact is that nowadays the price of one of these isn't an awful lot more than a regular 3200, or at the top end of the 3200 market is pretty much the bottom end of the coupe market. And I would spend the extra 5 to 10 grand and get one of these. If that's what you wanted, I'd just do it. Still that hesitation on turning. I don't know how Maserati managed it. Gearbox seems occasionally a little bit reluctant too. Maybe I'm just not getting used to it, but sometimes it's brilliant, other times not so much. That being said, in my own 550, if you don't know the gearbox, it's not the most cooperative, so I'm very willing to concede it might just be my general inexperience with the car. Engine pulls cleanly and smoothly. Now, of course, it hasn't got stupid amounts of torque or power. About 385 brake, about 330 odd pound-foot. That's enough to have fun. That's 1,680 kilos of car, and it does feel special. It also feels kind of narrow. You get in it, and when you shut the door, it whacks your elbow. Very odd, really. I mean, you can kind of rest yourself up here a little bit, and that does work, but odd, really. I'm used to cars being a little bit wider, maybe because I'm used to more modern stuff, and I guess this car can trace its roots back to the mid-90s, so I don't know. Maseratis, like Ferraris, are one of those cars that don't really tolerate abuse, and so this car really is a credit to its owner because it is in very good condition. The back is actually fairly practical and useful too, being much better than a Jaguar XKR and certainly better than a 911. That means that if you are looking for something semi-practical, it might fit the bill. Unfortunately, the boot isn't particularly capacious. Again, another problem shared with the 3200. But this feels like a car that I'd be much happier recommending to someone if they're willing to live with some of its quirks. The dynamics of this just still feel a little bit shy of where I'd like them to be. However, it looks the part, it sounds the part, and most importantly, I don't think it's as likely to ruin you as a 3200 would be. So, in that case, it really is a better 3200. Let's have one last go at it, shall we? She wiggles and she squirms. And on roads like this, which are lumpier, I think, than they look, the back end will play a little bit and the traction control light will come up, but it doesn't get in your way. It'll let you have fun still, and fun you certainly can have in this car. I'm certainly less white of knuckle than I was in the 3200, and I'm on unfamiliar roads today, so there's actually quite a bit to be said for this car. Like many Italian greats, it may not be the most rounded of cars, but it is not at all short on drama or on charm. And there's just enough practicality that I think you could justify this one. Don't think it's going to beat the Volvo in the all-rounder stakes, but it's all right. Next I'll have to hunt down a Gran Turismo and see what Maserati did next. That, I suspect, is going to be a very different animal. Anyway, thank you everyone for joining me on this little blast around the beautiful roads of Scotland. I'll see you all for the next one. Bye-bye.